I'm a resident of Haberfield and have been for nearly 25 plus years. I live in Ramsay Street, which is the main artery through the Haberfield shopping centre. At the time we purchased our house, we knew there was to be an expansion of what was then the City West Link. We knew there was to be an expansion of the road, but it was quite a few blocks from where we had purchased. So this has been quite a shock, and though I'm not focused on or obsessed about land value or house value or property value, I'm really not. I really care about the heritage of the suburb, and that has been my major concern with this project, although I share all the reservations that the previous speaker raised in relation to the wastage, the enormous waste of public money on this major project. Now, I've lived with we started basically our opposition to WestConnex from the time the first announcement was made in 2014. And really, I've been involved in the various groups and gone to demonstrations and, sat outside people occupying buildings and so on. But in the end, with the final act of what I call bastardry by the government of council amalgamations, and our major conduit or source of information and then an arena for raising our concerns was suddenly disappeared. Having said that, though, I've got to actually acknowledge that I think Richard Pearson, as administrator, has done his level best to both hear the community and provide it with the kind of support it required to actually keep the bastards at least a little bit honest. We made submissions on the concept plan for stage 1. We awaited release of the EIS. We have been vigilant, we're never idle, and that's the price you have to pay if you're going to influence in any way the project. Now, opposition, I think, is important because at least it maintains that ultimate boundary that all of us have as an objective, and that is to try and stop the project altogether or repurpose what is currently being done. And our speaker from from New South Wales Uni last time, who was also, I think, an engineer, I think made a good case for repurposing, and I believe his particular concept will be I think on exhibition at the City of Sydney. Now, the impacts during construction, and that's been our focus as community in recent months, and that is to try and manage the impacts of construction where we live. Initially, they feel really like a foreign invasion. Loss of heritage housing stock, so what we witnessed first of all was in our local streets the demolition of houses that had been there for over a century. Environmental degradation, vegetation removal, loss of wildlife habitat, increase in vermin-like rats, and then more possums escaping to try and find new habitat for their homes. So you get possums people have had them in their roof cavities and so on. And that's obviously it's a manageable problem, but it's something you wouldn't have expected. There can be constant noise from 8 a.m. to 5:30 with excavators, bulldozers, pile drivers, eccentric rippers and cranes of all sorts. So that's a kind of constant. There is, of course, 24/7 tunnelling, and you've seen an example of that, and they're about to start tunnelling under Walker Avenue. We're told it'll be 15 to 20 metres under the ground. We probably won't hear it, but some people might. They might experience some noise, some kind of low-level noise. The spoil haulage, of course, is being trucked out mostly, as far as I know, during the day. I'm a little bit of distance from the North Court site where that giant kind of factory-like structure has been constructed to hold the spoil. Now, you can have work sometimes at nights on specified days for specified periods. Night works happen on at least, or can happen on at least 3 days a week, but only permissible from the EIS on 2 consecutive days. During the initial construction, we had a lot of vibration akin to what I would say was an earth tremor, caused by giant jackhammers, or I'm really not even sure what kind of I think they were called eccentric rippers, breaking into sandstone bedrock, threatening the structure of heritage buildings all the way around. Now, some residents have sustained damage to, in particular, their ceilings, but there are health effects from the vibration. It's almost intolerable. Masses of dust emissions and dirt settling in every nook and cranny of our homes, threatening the health of residents with breathing problems. And an elderly lady that lives behind me certainly complained of this to me. Poor traffic management, semi-trailers and other industrial vehicles on our residential streets at all hours of the day and night, up to 6 truck movements per hour, because they are subcontractors hoping for as many loads a day, and that was mentioned by the previous speaker, they often queue up and they will park in local streets. We have been quite vigilant about attacking them, not physically, but certainly taking it up to them about why they're there and why there isn't any layover space for them somewhere to park elsewhere. But of course, it's a constant source of irritation. Worker vehicles parked everywhere without any respect for local needs or priorities. Parking spaces required. The requisite parking spaces have not been supplied by the contractor, and to this date I think they are still looking for additional parking for workers. Now you can imagine, you get up in the morning, you find just that truck that's just a little bit too far over your driveway and you can't quite get out safely. It becomes a constant source of irritation and aggravation. Noise walls and curtains or noise curtains are inadequate to ameliorate level of operational noise, which can be constant. Some difference, but not that much. But with the acoustic ratings we've been given, it is within the EIS compliance. Permanent or partial street closures, further increasing disruption to the local area. Ramsay Street, which is, as I said, the major artery, has been closed since mid-January. It was to reopen in mid-April. It's now closed until the end of May, and weather permitting, it will reopen at the end of May, or that's what we've been told by the site manager. Utility disruption, as pipes and wiring may have to be moved to accommodate tunnel or portals or just accommodate the construction. And that, unfortunately, is not coordinated between WestConnex and then Ausgrid arrives, or Telstra arrives, or the AGL arrives, or somebody else arrives, and they often are doubling up without any knowledge of what they're going to be facing on the site. And of course, there is the accompanying disruption to residents. Impact on local businesses and other service providers or institutions. Now, I regard the local businesses and the shops in the area as part of my community amenity. I love the suburb. I love to walk through it. I enjoy the amenity immensely. Those businesses have suffered a loss of 30 to 40% in trade since the closure of Ramsay Street. And there is no compensation in the project kind of agreement for loss of business. There is no compensation. Mind you, I think some of the businesses have been rather timid, and the Chamber of Commerce is also rather timid in facing up. In my view, what they ought to do is face up to the Premier and say, look, this just does not cut it. It's not good enough. If they go out of business, our amenity deteriorates, obviously. Streets are damaged with potholes and cracks appearing everywhere, where they're frequented by heavy vehicles like those enormous semis, double Bs and other vehicles. And they will be repaired eventually. The funding comes out of the project and goes to council, and council will eventually repair those. Bus stop closures or relocated bus stops due to temporary or major street closures. And unfortunately, the closure of Ramsay Street has inconvenienced many elderly residents in the suburb, elderly and disabled residents. Parking zone changes were made in our section of Ramsay Street without any prior notice, and then they were covered up with black plastic, and we still don't know whether the no stopping signs are going to apply. Now, that will be enormously inconvenient to the residents, and we haven't been able to get an answer. Neither we nor the project coordinators have received an answer as to whether they're going to now be activated or not. There will be 2 vent stacks. I think this is just the vent facility, the 2 vent stacks, because the M4 vent and the M45 vent are located on that site in Haberfield. So both of them are operating from there, and I think the ponds are elsewhere on that site. So it's a giant facility, and they are unfiltered. And we've been told again and again, even though it's contested information, it'll just distribute. It's not going to be any worse than the level of pollution that currently exists. But the real reason for no filter on the vents is cost. It's $500 million more, and then it's the operating cost of those filters. So, cost comes into it as soon as you see a variation in a plan, chase the reason, because you will find in the end the reason is cost. Changes or variations to published plans, and you've got to be vigilant about that, so you go through hundreds of pages. They happen with little or no notice. So our noise wall, which was to go up, we suddenly get a 2-week consultation time to comment on a noise wall, which is at variance with the UDLP, or the Urban Design and Landscape Plan, the proposal there. So suddenly vegetation on the residential side has disappeared from the plan, and there is an open drain running all along the back fences of Walker Avenue residents. And Walker Avenue was a quiet little street. Any compensation incurred during any damage incurred during the construction phase, and any compensation you might apply for will be subject to rigorous processes, and we've recently received an explanation of what that process will involve. But you get a dilapidation report beforehand, so if you're in whatever you're actually occupying, if you're going to be in the vicinity of the construction, make sure they will offer you a dilapidation report if you're within a certain radius, but make sure you get one done through another contractor. Now, responses to our representation. I'm going to use my time. I'm not going to allow a retired engineer to upstage me. I found it really enormously useful, your presentation. I'm just joking, really. Look, we have a local neighbourhood group which meets with the site manager and other WestConnex staff monthly. That's the Walker Avenue Neighbourhood Group. They have improved the policing of worker vehicles, parking of worker vehicles. There are polymer seals sprayed onto dust piles, but there are days when that doesn't seem to make any difference because there's so much work going on. The WestConnex unit has been established by the Inner West Council, and Rob Sherry and Kendall Banfield do their best to deal with the many complaints that come flooding in, and they follow up on complaints that the charm squad from WestConnex don't deal with adequately. And they are a charm squad, and that is a problem in itself. Most of the people you deal with, the community liaison people dealing with complaints, are relatively young women without much experience and no real authority. They're simply there to absorb what you say and take back some message, and then they come back with the reply. So if you're going to deal with issues, you've got alternatives to something they're putting up to you. You actually really need to find out who the head honcho is and deal with them. Strict semi-trailer routes, although the policing of this is inconsistent, but we do have stricter policing of the semi-trailer routes, because they just used to go anywhere, and they often travel at speed because for them it's very important to get more than one load a day. They want to get 2 or 3 loads if they can. Early advice of night work and other disruptions, we do get that. The Community Liaison Forum has been a very useful forum, and there are some members here, and I know that for me it's been very useful in airing certain issues and having some issues followed up. There are earlier and prompter replies to our complaints. They know us all now. More extensive vibration monitoring and noise monitoring has been undertaken. Our constant email updates, construction of permanent noise walls was brought forward, but then that bringing forward has led to a variation in the UDLP, the original plan, and we are quite concerned about that. We actually are opposing the current proposal. But there is no compensation in the end for disruption or damage. And it takes its toll in terms of your time. You have to be constantly vigilant, and there are times when you just do lose it. And I must say, I have lost it at times. And you lose it with workers who really, they're just there trying to do their job. We now believe, with the release of the M45 Stage 3 proposal, that we will not be released from this until 2022-23. Because there is some impact on Haberfield until that end date, because they're going to use part of this site and the North Avenue site until 2022-23, and perhaps also the Reg Cody Reserve site, because they couldn't find a second construction site in Haberfield that wouldn't have been a park. So thank you very much. I hope that's useful. Vigilance is important. Be informed, stay connected, and for heaven's sake, write those letters to Premier or Minister yourselves, even if you're using a lot of the text from groups. Thank you very much. Thanks.